right. Well, hey everybody, how y'all doing?
Awesome.
Good.
How's everybody out there doing? I hope that they're doing well. This is officially week 5, or our 5th episode. Really, we really were supposed to, for consistency's sake, record something last week. We were
supposed
yeah, we were.
You were
but
supposed to.
But I want to talk about the more important thing is that someone special in this group was in Jamaica.
Yeah,
and
who was that?
Was that you?
It was me.
You have a glow to you. You have a
red-handed.
glow to you, sir.
Well, sorry, I as in Jamaican, the way that we say it.
Oh, we say it. Wow.
Is I was basking in the sun mayut. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
Sun might. Wow.
Sun mayut. Yeah.
Wow.
You know, and I had some rice and peas.
No.
Some
Peas.
curry goat,
Nice.
some
Wagwan.
oxtail,
Wagwan.
right? Some plantain, you know,
Some plátanos.
some plantain, you know, and you know, I just there was there with my Jamaican brethren.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
so-
you know, some of the pictures you were sending and some of the stuff, it looked like you guys were suffering for Jesus, but
suffering for Jesus.
you were having a
It's tough.
good
I
time.
was having a good time.
What was that all about?
For
What
Jesus.
brought you
While
to
suffering.
Jamaica? Do you want to give maybe some
Yeah, man.
context to that? I think I think it was really a cool trip.
Yeah. No. So what's awesome is that the lead pastors in Water's Edge, we get together once a year, and we were able to do a couple of things on the agenda. One was we were able to strategize and just think long term about like where Water's Edge is going, help you know give some vision and clarity to that.
This is like a pastor's retreat for the pastors in our church network.
Yep.
Perfect.
Yep. And then as they're thinking through that, and that's all of Water's Edge is working through these ideas. So we got to be a part and give our thoughts and input to that. And then, you know, second of all, we got to serve at an orphanage which Zeal is connected to.
And Zeal
shout
is
out to
one of-
Pastor Corey.
Yep. Zeal is one of
Castle.
our campuses that
Yep.
are in our church network
In our
based out
church
of
network.
Jamaica.
And it was Zeal's 4-year
Wow.
birthday.
That's
Cool.
incredible.
And so, like, which was just so dope to be down there. And man, again, shout out to Pastor Corey. Like, just hosted the mess out of us. We just felt loved, and it was just so cool to see the ministry that him and others have been like working so hard for.
Yeah.
And so, like, yeah, man, they're just doing like a great work down there. So, yeah.
So cool. Awesome. We didn't get the invite, but that's fine.
Yeah, that's whatever.
It's what happens when
We live vicariously through you.
Yes, we do.
And
we
you'll continue to with those attitudes.
Hey, we'll continue.
With
Hey,
those
listen, I was
attitudes,
gonna
that's
say-
why you didn't get invited.
I was going to say
You know
something
what I'm saying?
positive. I was going to say we're going to challenge you and celebrate you, but no,
Yeah.
forget you now. Forget you
With
now.
those attitudes, that's why you'll be asking me about the glow that I
the
feel.
curry goat.
The curry goat, the rice and peas. No.
Yeah. No, that's good. Well, thanks so much for giving us an update. I think there's one thing that we definitely need to talk about. This past weekend, really even this past week was just a lot of stuff happening in culture, in music specifically. But this past weekend was a big Super Bowl. Super Bowl.
I thought you were going to
50.
say the spy balloons.
Oh, the
but
spy
no,
balloons.
that's
Yeah, I
okay.
I
forgot
got
about
shot
that.
down.
You know, did y'all see the tweet from Elon Musk? He was like, "Hey, sorry about that. Just my friends just coming to say hi."
Wow.
I was like, "All right, cool."
Dude, when you are a quadrillionaire,
You could just say
like,
whatever.
you could just-
And when you own Twitter.
whatever.
When you own Twitter.
Yeah.
But so in culture we had anywhere from Grammys to pretty interesting and wild performances.
Yeah.
To Super Bowl 57, am I right?
Yeah.
Yep, Super Bowl 57. You know, Kansas City Chiefs and Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, man.
What a tight game. I feel like the Eagles got robbed. Let's talk about
Let's
it.
talk about
I don't
it.
care how
talk-
it happened.
You
This dude was hating so hard.
I was hating
He
on
was
the
hating
Eagles.
so hard
Were you
at the
guys
house.
hanging?
Yeah, he
Oh,
came
man,
over the
yeah.
house. We were watching the Super Bowl. Every little thing that the Eagles did right, he was like, cheaters.
oh man,
Cheaters.
Oh, man.
I like, listen, just because the Cowboys
Ooh,
will
America's
never get
team.
back to the Super Bowl
yeah.
So
They
no one
had
else
their-
in
should.
Jerry Jones's lifetime,
Ooh, yeah.
I think it's a punishment from
I
God.
think you know,
It might be.
You know,
He's a bad dude.
Wow. But God loves him, and there's grace. But
I was about to say, does he? No,
All that's to say,
Not a lot of time to grab that grace.
Listen, all that to say
Start
is,
reaching out, Jerry.
that's bad dude. some regrets there.
So I thought the Super Bowl halftime show was
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Was like honestly the
Riri.
tamest.
Rihanna. Oh yeah, let's talk about
Yeah.
it because there is all over social media lots and lots of opinions. Lots and lots of opinions. Some good, lots bad. You know, some saying that the preview before she came on, she looked like a Grinch character. I'm sorry, I just needed to go there.
I do not endorse that statement.
Listen,
I think that she looked like an amazing woman who wanted to share her talents with the world.
Wow. Okay.
And so for all of those Rihanna fans,
Don't come
it is
for you.
Joelle.
Okay, yeah. Listen,
Torres.
I'm just sharing what I've seen on Twitter. I'm not saying that I endorse it either. I'm just saying.
All right.
This is what the people are saying.
All right. I just want you to keep that same energy when they come for you.
Which kind of people had things to say about it?
Oh man, which kinds of people?
Yeah,
I don't know that.
I think you're like, I don't think the general populace was like too concerned maybe about the Super Bowl halftime show.
Jellyfish?
it was like Republican evangelicals. That's what I feel like.
Okay.
That I was seeing.
We getting real specific.
We getting real specific. Listen, this is beyond the message,
I
beyond the
didn't know
sermon.
they were Republican.
Beyond the Super Bowl.
Because man, you could do a little creeping on the Instagram
Oh, stop.
and you could do a little creeping
Yeah,
and find out
yeah.
what side they're on. Not knocking everybody, but that's what I'm seeing. That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. I'm just relaying information of what I'm seeing. But anyways, do we want to start in the Rihanna?
Yeah, I think like I'll say just me personally.
Yeah.
Watching it, somebody said like we had like kids and everything around, and and it was just like I think for me, with all the other halftime shows, like sometimes it's like a lot. And I thought it was probably one of the most tamest. And somebody said something which was really cool at the house, was just like, man, like, it was just cool for her to say like, my music is really great. You guys know the catalog. I don't really have to do a lot. And people loved it. So it is interesting when you hear the like, I think the pushback was from people which were like, I was expecting crazy. Right.
So when they didn't get it,
they didn't get it. Like, it's like drama sells. Like, how can I say something? Because like, I mean, let's be honest. In the last couple of years, that's probably like the tamest.
Yeah.
The tamest
I did see a
Super
lot
Bowl
of
part.
belly buttons. I did see a lot of belly buttons.
Yeah.
But
she was pregos.
I mean, not from her. I ain't seen no
About
belly
the
button, but
dancers.
The dancers, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
That's true.
But I mean,
I wasn't
all that
paying
to say
attention.
that I agree. I think it was the tamest. I was actually pretty impressed with just the different levels of like those little panels that they were standing on. That's
That was
150 feet
trippy.
up in the air, something like that at times.
Man, that was wild.
And even the choreographers, I actually really enjoyed it, and I agree. I think her repertoire and her playlist just spoke for itself.
Yeah.
And I mean, she was what people are allegedly pregnant again. Allegedly pregnant again.
Not. I thought that was the like.
You thought that was the point?
That was the point. I thought that's what she was communicating.
Well,
See,
yeah.
And if she's
but
not pregnant, as
again,
a man, I want to apologize.
Right. But that's why I said allegedly.
assuming.
Okay.
Allegedly,
just in case.
she hasn't
I don't
come
want
out
to-
and said it. So the queen herself has not said it yet.
Yeah, man. See,
but lots of people. I mean, her first scene.
I don't want to step into nothing there.
Was definitely her previewing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like one thing you could say about the halftime show, like if you're like, Christian, very conservative, you're like, I don't want to see any skin. I don't want any like dancing that looks like anything sexualized. Like, that's fine, whatever your conviction is. But it is cool to see like art displayed at a high level, like one of the best singers in the world.
Yeah.
The creativity of the choreography, those platforms. It's like, the Olympics when they do like that big thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, they got like the best people in the world.
Yeah.
To like display this artistic creative aspect that comes from God.
Yeah.
So it's cool just to even see that kind of thing.
Well, I'll even say this, like, so even from a theological space, right? all good things come from God.
Yeah.
Right. And they don't have to look like, it's like, here it is in the Bible.
Cookie
like
cutter,
all those good things come from God. So like you're saying, art is something that's good. And the church was, the catalyst for a lot of that. Like you go, the Basilica, you keep on going, paintings, all of the big name painters that from back in the day, the Michelangelo, all those guys, like they were believers in Jesus, and they believed like God was the catalyst for the imagination, for music, for the arts, and those kind of things. I think we can celebrate it when it's done right? Yeah. Like if it's not being overly sexualized or something crazy is going on, like we can actually celebrate those things. And there's times when it's like not done right. And I think like at the Grammys, for example, right? Like those are things where Christians get flustered and fried about that. Now I have a different take. You guys have, I don't actually know what your
we
take.
chatted a little bit.
Yeah. So I didn't watch. I actually didn't watch the Grammys. I don't have cable or anything, so like I was keeping up on social media. So I was seeing pictures and some little clips and stuff, and I know that like even some even our like Christian brothers and sisters won some Grammys, like the Maverick City Crew, the Kirk Franklins and stuff, 4 Grammys, which I think was the same amount as even Beyonce. Something crazy like that. Yeah. Someone said, but there was definitely a performance that I know that a lot of people were head over heels and had many, which was Sam Smith's performance. There was definitely a lot of red, a lot of fire, a lot of horns.
A lot of over-sexualization. I don't really have a take on it because I really didn't watch. So I didn't watch it.
I've seen pictures.
I didn't watch
it. We were talking none of us have watched it.
Yeah. Let's play it.
Actually, let's comment on it.
Let's play it right now.
So I think like I understand that like people get outraged by this stuff, especially because it's involving things that we care about deeply, not only care about, but believe in, are willing to give our lives for, which is the church, which is Jesus Christ, which is all these things that run deep. I think for me, where I have landed is that I don't expect people which are in darkness to understand how to operate in the light or from a perspective of light, right? I don't expect people which are covered in unrighteousness or ungodliness to operate as godly people. And so for me, I feel like getting upset about it, I can understand it, and it makes me feel itchy, and that's part of the reason why I stopped watching the Grammys a long time ago. But like when I see the vitriol that comes from like the interspace, you know what I mean? Like I'm just like, you get mad because people which don't know no better are not doing better. Like that's where I think like my struggle is, right? Sure. And again, I'm not saying that like you shouldn't or whatever, but I just like, to me, I feel like I continue to move forward in that space of like, like it doesn't affect me because I already know that like you're not correctly representing God. You don't know God. You're far from God. And you know what? Like, people which are in darkness will operate as those in darkness. So I don't know. That's where I land. But you felt a little different.
Yeah, we were talking about this before we started recording.
Yeah, for sure. And I totally get that in the sense of like, it's not honoring God to like get so offended that you're like writing hateful content on social media and like wanting to like see these people burn or something like that. But I do think, at least for me, like there's a space for like being offended for the honor and the holiness of God. And I think you were touching on that too. Like you get like the itchy feeling or the ickiness or whatever. And for me, it could be a little bit more even personality profile or like that judgment thing weighs heavy on me. Like when something's right or when something's wrong, I feel it pretty strongly. So again, I didn't see the Last Supper performance or whatever that is from the Grammys, but I could definitely picture if I saw it, that offending me to see someone like representing themselves as Christ in like that holy sacred space. Yeah. I could see that.
Yeah. I don't know. I just feel like I think the church is always 10 years behind. Right. Actually, you know what, guys, let's so we're doing this real time right now. I think like let's stay here. We'll have another podcast where we talk about the sermon, but I feel like I just feel led that we should talk about these cultural things, right?
Yeah.
Because culture matters. But so I think that the church is always 10 years behind, right? And part of the reason is because we have chosen to fight battles that like, do we necessarily need to fight? And then when we come and engage culture, right? What happens is we're fighting caricatures, right? We're fighting the meme of the Christian on the computer, like, oh my God, let me write this like thing, right? And like, I don't know about you, but like, if you guys have siblings, one of the funnest things to do with a sibling is when you find out that thing that bends them a little bit, is to continue push that button. And I think that's what happens, right? And there was an expectation, there was a rightful blowback that was going to come from that. And I don't know, like, but my scripture tells me that like we're supposed to love our enemies, that we're supposed to treat them differently, and in doing so, Romans 12, we heap hot coals on their heads, and it also allows God to judge them. And so like I think like the offense of God, taking the offense of like, man, I'm offended for God, as if God needs our offense. You know what I'm saying? Like God, He's God. Like, you know what I mean? And so I don't know. That's just my thing. Is just like when we have these culture, I think we create blocks and caricatures that we now have to like tear down. Like, no, that's not all believers are like that. Well, where do these things come from? It comes from us going crazy when the Sam stuff. And what would it look like if like no one, because Sam is doing that because he wants blowback, right? Like because he knows like there's going to be Christians tweeting about it. There's going to be people defending it. And so now his profile goes up, right? Yeah.
Sure.
Like that's why he did it.
Views go up.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's just my thing. I just think like we might have a better chance in these battles as we deal with culture and we try to bring truth in darkness if we're not having to always tear down the straw men that people have created because of our own actions. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think some of the argument maybe on the other side would be how laid back and casual should Christians be about the whole world around them and society around them? Like, do we take it so casually that because I think that's the fear, like, well, we start to become non-factors and society just continues to sweep past us if no one is like holding some ground and saying, hey, no, that's wrong. You shouldn't be doing that or representing that in that way. How do you speak truth maybe to culture if you're not ever confronting culture?
Yeah, so this is where it gets interesting, right? Because
it's a great question, by the way.
Yeah,
great question.
It's a great question because I think like I just think about church history, right? Like the way that they were different from culture, and I think this is what the Gospels and the writers of Scriptures continue to allude to. And again, I might be wrong in my interpretation, but I think that the way that they did it is that they existed in culture, but their existence was countercultural. Right? They didn't play the game of culture. They didn't go and say, don't do this. They just didn't do it. And there was a way of life that was so countercultural and appealing that the people which were in culture decided to say, I want to do what you're doing. Right? So like real quick, church history. The first century Roman world was a hyper-sexualized world, right? Like we think we're living in a time, like we're talking about, man, there was temples, which also the temples in that day and time doubled as banks, right? So everyone had to come to the temple. And there were temple prostitutes. And there were gods that would like literally to give offering to the gods, you would have sex, right? With these temple prostitutes. All types of, you name whatever sexual stuff that you know happens, like it was happening freely and rampantly during that time. Some, as people reached orgasm or whatever, would literally cut off pieces of their bodies, their genitals. Like when I'm telling you, like we're talking about the buck wild stuff, when you start digging into the history, like this is what's happening. And yet here comes these believers which had a sexual ethic, right? That was monogamous, is that right?
Yeah, you said it right,
monogamous,
yeah.
right? Between a man and a woman, that was in a rampant, hypersexualized world. So their countercultural ways did two things, right? Because I talked about the bank first. What it did was it said, like, we're not going to engage in that, number one. And number two, because they didn't engage in it, right, it changed the economy. Because other people said, like, oh, wait a second, what are you doing? We're not going to bank. We're not going to go here. We're not going to do that, right? Because that's where commerce was held also at the temples. That's why you find in, I forget where it was. I don't know if it's Ephesus or whatever. Like, they're saying, hey, run these Christians out of here. These are the people that have turned the world upside down. They literally changed the economic landscape by being countercultural. So they said no, but it was their actions. It was the way that they lived and the way that they drew people which were outside of culture into a new way of living, a better way of living, one that had peace, right? Like me cutting myself, me like doing endless sexual escapades is empty. But here's these people which seem that they have peace and they're not investing in this thing that I have. That's another way of saying no. And I think sometimes we think like, I need to stand up for God, right? And I'm not even saying that we shouldn't say like, man, let me tell you about the real God and how this happens. But I'm just saying, I think that the way that we think we need to do it is almost like I need to stand up for God. Instead of saying, I'm going to show you what God looks like, right? And it's just different from what you have. My value's different.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
That's a great point.
I think what I see from a lot of like conservative evangelical Christians, though, is that we're not the first century church where we're this persecuted, marginalized, minority, but, we seem to be taking more ground and that's encouraging. Like, no, it's been a Christianized Western world for 1,500 years. It's the largest religion in the world, the largest religion in America. So this is the commentary you hear a lot. Shouldn't we be taking more ground, like more involved in politics, like more like anti-abortion campaigns and, these kind of things? Like, why would we surrender the influence the church has gained over 2,000 years and say, now we're going to act like the marginalized minority again, who has no influence in the culture, no voice? Because, it is just hard to compare us to first century Roman society.
Well, I'll also say like, then we need to check church history, right? Because how did we gain that kind of foothold in the world and stuff like that? It wasn't because like we're acting like this powerful
Tyrants
or taking into like, that's not how it was. It was through sacrifice. It was through persecution. That's actually what's happened. And the more we've become this thing, this mammoth, right? Which is saying like, we need to take these hills. And we'll talk about this another time for sure. There's this dominion theology where we need to there's these 7 mountains that we need to take over. I just think that's like so antithetical to the gospel, to the scriptures. Like, and I could get on my soapbox. I'm not going to get there, but I think that's not there. And what we've actually seen is America is no longer a Christian. We might have been founded by Christian. We're the third most unchurched country in the world. I want you to think about that. For all of our
in like the Western
in
world,
the world,
we
are the third most unchurched country in the world. Check those statistics.
More than like the Middle East, because there's got to be like 99% Islam countries.
It has to do with size and all that. We are the third. My missions professor told me this stat in 2007. And I remember it shook me too. We're the third most. We have been losing ground, right? And that's
I think that's
most
of
Western culture. But like what I'm saying is that the I think it's counterintuitive in the argument because, right? What was happening prior to that? Right? We were acting like that. And we didn't continue going upward in that trajectory. Right? We've gone backward. You have more people deconstructing. You have more people walking away from faith in the West. But in places where there's persecution, where people are having to live out their faith in different ways, there's actually growth. So right now in the Middle East, the highest conversion rate of believers is happening in the Middle East.
Sure.
Right? It's not in the West. The biggest, as far as like revivals or people coming to salvation and stuff like that, is happening in South America. Like it's not in America. So like, again, where you see Christianity, power, and those things do not interlock. And again, I'm just giving you church history here, right? And again, we can work through stats and stuff like that. I think it feels counterintuitive because it feels like we have to do more. But it's, again, check my stats. You know, I'm glad to have the conversation. I'm just telling you that, like, where the West continues to progress in Australia, far from God, post-Christian nation. We were talking about America's going to be a post-Christian nation a long time ago. England, post-Christian nation. Canada, post-Christian. And America has been trending there. We are now a post-Christian nation.
Wow.
Like, that's just a fact.
Yeah.
Right?
I do think, so not to like stay in this point forever, but I do think there's like, historically, there's a lot that you could say, like that Christianity and power was together for hundreds and hundreds of years without some like sharp decline. I think in the European world, like the post-Christian aspect was like World War I and World War II of like, how can there really be a good God when all this stuff is happening? Like, I think that's definitely one of the catalysts. And then, so here's what I'm saying is that I think there is like a recent, like, from like the sexual revolution, major world wars, like in Western thought, there has been like a sharp movement away from traditional, like,
I would say post-Enlightenment.
Sure, you could say post-Enlightenment too.
Post-Enlightenment, that's.
I guess I'm arguing, is it really that the church was like being all power hungry and that's made society jump away, or was it other factors?
Like, let's talk
This
about.
is so interesting.
okay, just
more,
so that we
more.
don't. But like, again, when are we talking about church history? Are we talking about post, like, Christianity becoming the state religion in Rome with Constantine? Is that what we're talking about? Because it does start changing.
Sure.
Like we can start saying, like, that's the first time post Jesus resurrection, apostles, the church being born, that we start seeing power being used in a political way. Right? Is that point? And what happens with the Catholic Church and the things that need reformation after that? Right? Yeah. Like, literally, there's wars that are now starting because of like what people believe. There's manipulation that we know of different Catholic, and even some as we continue Protestant, like, Calvinists, like killing people because they don't believe. Like, it's all that. Like, that starts different. The 325 years before that, like, going backwards from Constantine's, like, if you trace it, that church is being persecuted and it's growing wildly.
Yeah.
Right? And then all of a sudden Constantine comes up, right? Some may argue that's a good thing. Some might argue that's a bad thing, whatever. That's not what this is about. What happens is now, like, you have this intertwining of like politics and the church that now change the way. You have the Crusades now that come from that. That's what I'm saying. Like, anytime that we use power in the way of like trying to engage culture in a position of power, I think, like, just church history, and again, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I can only speak for myself. That's the way I'm reading it. That I think that's when it fails, right? Like, I think that's when we find ourselves in like not good places. Because, like, we start using the systems of the world. But the inverted picture of the gospel is that it wasn't that they were rushing to be on the political mountains or any of that. Is that they were being in the world, right? They were just there. and there were artists and there were musicians that were singing about the glory of God, and they were apologists that were arguing about the glory of God in culture. Paul is sitting there using Aristotle and Greek thinkers and thoughts and saying, let me tell you about this unknown God that you have. Like, they're engaging culture by living life, but living it in a different way, as opposed to saying, let me hold on to power and utilize power in this thing. And I think that's what's happened. Honestly, that's what's happened in the last couple of years in the church. And like, we found ourselves, whether it's the left or the right, intertwining with politics. And I think anytime you find that in any different power structure, I think you start moving away from what the gospel looks like and the picture of how Jesus engaged the world. And I think it's easy to say, like, oh man, we need to do something. I just don't see that in church history. Yeah. But again, that's just my interpretation of reading it.
I think that's a great point about power in the church and like the unhealthy aspects of that. I think what people feel is like Western society, in America specifically, because this has already happened in Europe, like, wow, we are running so fast away from like this kind of Christian worldview or ethos in the United States. And there's like a fear, like, well, we don't pray, so maybe that's the answer. We got to get prayer back in our schools. And, well, maybe it's this, because people are afraid of, my kids are losing their faith, our churches are declining in attendance. And so I think they're looking for the answer. And the answer that comes to people first is like, well, we could vote in Christian people, and we could get on our school boards and not let them teach books that we don't agree with and things like that. And so there's obviously a lot of gray in terms of like, what's good,
they're
what's
not praying. It's what I'm saying. It's like, how can I use power to manipulate this situation to my best efforts? But we're asking, like, why are you not teach your kids to pray, and they'll pray in school? Like, do you know that's a lie, that prayer is not allowed in school? Like, as long as you're a student in public schools,
student-led,
as long as you're a student, like, you can. I know there's a young lady here, something Elkhart or whatever. She started here in Michigan. I think there was like 1,000 kids, which would come to her school at a public school, and they would have like worship and a message that was led from. We have not taught our kids to go and be in the world. This is what I'm talking about. It's really easy to use the sword, because the sword brings about quick change, but it doesn't bring about lasting change, right? The reason why I have a soapbox on this is literally, this is what my thesis is on, right? That I'm writing for seminary. Like, the sword power brings about quick change, but there's only one thing that happens with the sword. It doesn't change hearts. All you're doing is you're trading one tyrant for another, and people's hearts just get hardened, right? So we can talk about this when it comes to sexuality. We can talk about this when it comes to women and men dynamics. We can talk about any time power is used, there's always going to be pushback. And even with the first wave to second wave feminism, what's happening now, right? Is it good that women have equal rights and all those different things? Yes, it is. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't have done it, right? But what I am saying is, now you're seeing this like unhealthy like movement of men which are angry at women, right? This like red pill society, you can name it. It's all over, right? This was the beauty of the civil rights movement. It chose to work against power, right? You go to South Africa, they had the
you mean to not wield power.
To not wield power, right? In the face of power, it chose peace. You look at South Africa when Mandela came back, he could have turned things all the way upside down. But what did he do? He had this Truth and Reconciliation Council meetings, because he knew, like, if this country is going to stay together, right? Like, we're going to have to do this differently.
But there was still organization and influence and political aspects in civil rights and
there was,
South Africa.
And I'm not saying that we shouldn't engage in those things. But what I'm saying is that when we feel like we need to create Christian organizations or as Christians, we need to carry these mountains because of this is what God is calling us to do. What I'm saying is that all you're doing is trading one tyrant in for another. I truly believe that the best way that change happens is when I love my neighbor. Because when I love my neighbor who may be racist, now sees me as a real human being, right? And sees that I'm not the caricature or the thing that they believed is not good and is ultimately sinful, and they repent the need to God, that brings about lasting change. And they'll go vote because their neighbor now becomes a real person, not a caricature. But when I come to them and say, here's this policy, you should do this. Well, no wonder why you have whole states saying, we don't want this to be learned in our schools, or we want this to be learned in our schools, and all this other stuff. What I'm saying is power and all that will always bring about fighting, but what brings about lasting change, and we talked about this a little bit in our sermon series, and we'll talk about it in the next podcast, is that like that legacy of time is that like what the early church understood is that water eroding the mountain over and over again in love. The world will know that you are mine by the way that we get political positions. No, by the way that we love one another, we'll one day split the mountain in half, right? So you go from having mountains to the Grand Canyon. And that was done through time and what? Water. And this is what I'm saying. Christians, we've forsaken this idea of what I've in my thesis I've patented and and legitimately I one day hope to like publish this book, what I would call soft resistance. Right? It is resistance that's not manipulative and coercive but it takes time and the legacy of time that someday change will happen.
Yeah.
What was Dr. King's famous words? I may not get there with you, but I have a dream that one day my kids and your kids will sit and play. Now my kids I'm married to a white woman. Like that was illegal at one point. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, that's the difference. That's the change, right? And I'm not saying it always works out perfect, but what I'm saying is that like there's something that happens when the hearts of change. And I'm saying the last thing, the most beautiful thing, Birmingham, Salem. Do you know what happened? They videotaped them walking across and getting stoned, not fighting back with the guys and people knew that this was happening. Pastors were telling King and those guys not to do it, and they're getting stoned and they're getting beaten, and people watched it on TV for the first time, and the thing that they kept in the back of their heads was now in front of them. And what happened? This next time that they walked through Salem again with the Sheriff Bull or whatever his name is, which was there were white folks and black folks and Christians and Jews, and they were walking hand in hand. That was the difference. That's what changed hearts. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I'm saying. I just feel like, that's why I said, like, I didn't want to get on my soapbox, but I think that's the thing, that's the tension that as Christians, we feel like we have to use power. We have to use the ways of the world, but the way of Jesus is countercultural in every fiber.
It's good.
Yeah.
I like that.
Wow. So through love, understanding is how we can change the world.
This was only supposed to be the intro to this podcast.
Yeah, let's start our podcast now.
We didn't hit record.
That was good, man. This is what this is about. Sometimes we're going to talk about cultural issues. We're going to talk about history in the church, history in our nation, and we might not get to going beyond the past sermon, and that's all right.
No,
that's all right. I think these are really good conversations to have, and really, it's a great space to just share our points of views. And if something stood out to you, if you're watching on our YouTube page, please leave a comment down below. We'd love to continue this conversation, even in the comments. Yeah. We have people that will comment back, and just
To your point, Joel, I think the reason why these conversations matter too, because this is what people are talking about at home.
100%. Yeah. 100%. And there's probably more people than not that also don't even have an outlet to be able to talk about these things.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that we could sit here and just chop it up and break it down a little bit, and hopefully maybe, help create some cool conversations within those people that might be watching or tuning in. Some healthy conversations, some
Sure.
safe conversations. Sometimes it might get a little rowdy, but that's fine.
Hey, man.
It's too.
It's real.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Well,
Good stuff.
thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date. Again, we are sorry that we didn't get episode last week, but hey, thank you for tuning in and clicking on this, and don't forget to share it too. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. You be blessed. Peace and blessings.